Hi, everybody. Welcome to Busy Living Sober. And it is episode 358 with Brad. Are you the founder of Sober Motivation?
Yes.
And what's your last name?
McLeod.
McLeod. Brad McLeod from Sober Motivation. And I reached out to Brad. I'm so excited to have him on. And you know what? Before I go any further, let's do a shout out to SoberLink. Getting sober requires a rewiring of the brain. Instead of reaching for a drink, we have to learn how to reach for support. It can be hard, especially if you don't have something or someone to keep you honest. That's why I teamed up with SoberLink. SoberLink's remote alcohol monitoring system is designed to help you sustain a sober lifestyle while rebuilding trust with loved ones. Small enough to fit in your purse or pocket and discreet enough to use in public. SoberLink devices combine facial recognition, tamper detection, and real-time results so friends and family know instantly that you're sober and working towards recovery goals. As a recovery coach, I really can't think of a better tool to demonstrate your commitment to sobriety. Visit www.soberlink.com/BLS to learn and receive $50 off your device. I think they actually sponsor you too. Is that true?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, SoberLink's incredible.
Aren't they awesome?
Yeah, very awesome.
Very awesome. Well, it was funny because when I had on, you had Pete Sousa, who I've known forever, and his brother Mike forever. And Mike was like, oh my God, what a great device to give to sponsees. I was like, isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
So tell me, will you tell us your story, why you came about doing Sober Motivation, how it was born and all of that, your story, where did this all begin?
Yeah. Well, the sober motivation thing was, I started out like 6 years ago. I used to work at a treatment center. I worked there for 6 years and I got completely burned out and the fentanyl popped into the scene and everything. So, and I was working with teenagers and they were dying, so I got burned out from that job, but I still wanted to stay into, trying to help people with staying sober. So I started to share my story online, and then that sort of got a little bit boring, right? Like you can only share it so many times. And I was like, wow, this is getting a bit much after a year. So then I had the idea of, hey, let's share other people's stories. Let's share other people's stories and see if we can do something like that, if people would be willing to. That's kind of where the sober motivation thing came about. And then I started getting a ton of stories submitted and we just tried our best to get them all shared. And now there's like, I don't know, some days 50, 60 stories that come in and we can't share them all, but we do our best to share people's stories and just for them and for other people, like to have people, give people a place where they can share their stories and feel heard and get some, keep it up and good work. And then also to inspire other people that might be struggling to say, hey, like, look what people have been able to come back from and be sober. So that was the idea. And then it just kind of took off.
So where were you working in a treatment center, and what was your story? Did you get sober, and when?
Yeah. Yeah. The treatment center was actually in this small town of Laura in Ontario, because I'm in Canada. So it's in Laura, Ontario. Yeah. I got sober on January 11th, 2010. And it was a lot of different times trying leading up to that. But that was sort of the day that day too is I'll never forget, because I was living up in Canada at the time. I grew up in the US. I lived there 17 years between Texas and North Carolina. And this day I was I lived in Canada. I was trying to get cleaned up. I got cleaned up for the most part. I got off of the hard drugs and doing heroin and pills. And I was on methadone program for a bit, but I was still drinking every day. And I went back to visit my family. They live in North Carolina. They still do. And then this girlfriend I was trying to reconnect with. And I got off the airplane. Well, I got stopped in customs first in Toronto. And they were asking me a million different questions. And I knew in my stomach something was up. They took me in this room. They were like, oh, we need your ID, and asking me all these questions. Most of them I didn't even know the answer to, but I should have just, my gut feeling was like, just turn around. Don't even, go through with this flight. But I did it anyway. And then when I landed in New York City, nothing happened, right? It was a layover flight. Nothing happened. So I was like, oh, maybe it was just a big misunderstanding or whatever. But then when I landed in North Carolina, the police were there. They were ready. They had my mugshot and everything. It was local police. It was the airport police. It was a handful of people. And they were like, yeah, you're under arrest. And I was like, oh, okay. And I thought I'd been arrested before. I was a convicted felon at 18. So when I got my first arrest was at 16. And I was like, okay, well, it can't be that bad. Well, it was really bad. It was drug trafficking charges. I had sold drugs to an undercover police officer, old acquaintance of mine. What I found out later had got in trouble and had set me up on this deal to do several transactions with an undercover police officer. So that all came to head on that day, and I'll never forget it because I had this girlfriend was picking me up, and in front of the airport, you drive around in the circle there. You're not really allowed to park. So as they kind of put the handcuffs on and were searching me at this police car, out of the corner of my eye, it was just the timing was just perfect. I could see her, like grinning ear to ear, just happy that we were reconnecting and going to see each other again after like this 8 months. And I was just right then and there. I made a pat with myself, a commitment that like enough of this, enough living like this, because that was really when I truly understood that my actions were impacting other people's lives and things had to change. So I spent the next year in prison, and that's when things changed. Everything changed in that next year. So I was sort of how I got sober, I guess, and the importance of that date.
So did you go to treatment after you were in prison as well?
No, I've been in
Okay.
treatment before that. I did a 12-month program when I was 17 as well, wilderness program. My parents signed me over to this
Yeah.
program, so
Mhm.
you can't leave. You can't leave if you want to. It was 4 months in a basement, chicken wire on the windows, big lock. You can't leave if you want to. And then you went into a cabin program once you graduated, once you were, not going to run away. Cause I ran away on the way to this place. I was in the psych ward beforehand. University at North Carolina, UNC Chapel Hill. I was in the hospital, it was like the ninth floor. My second time in the psych ward for suicidal thoughts. And that's when my parents hired this transport company, hired this private transport. I never knew any of this stuff existed. I didn't know. But they were hired. My folks hired them to take me to this program, and I actually ran away from them at a rest stop. And there was the sheriff and state troopers and local police, and everybody was on the hunt. I lasted like on the run there for like 4 or 5 hours. I ran through a beehive. So I ran through a beehive and I got stung. So I was already in rough shape, and it was pretty hot that day. But yeah, so then I ended up at that treatment center, and I also went to South Florida too for a detox at some point in there. Clearwater. Yeah, so that was sort of my.
What it's crazy because I have friends and family members that I know have done the same thing to kids and gone and it kidnapped them, right? That's pretty much what it was, kidnapped and taken away. But it's now I'm here as a mom myself, and I'm like, I can understand why your parents did that because they're like, oh my God, our baby is like out of control. What are we gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah, out of
Right?
control. Yeah, exactly.
Out of control, just like, and they want to do anything to save you, right? They're like, this is our child. We get, your mom gave birth to you, and she's like, what is happening? Where is he going? What's going on with them? So now you've been sober for, oh my gosh, so how long are you sober? Because you're
13 years.
13 years. Yeah, that's amazing. 13 years. And you worked in the treatment center, and it's hard to work in treatment, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was really rewarding and it was really good, but yeah, eventually it's hard because to get sober, like I know everybody's like you go to treatment and it was a 6 month residential program too. So a lot of these people put in a lot of work and a lot of them didn't make it. Like didn't stay sober. I mean, it's sad to say, but over the 6 years, there's probably a handful of people. I mean, that's hundreds of people going through. And I think that's probably fairly common across the board. You don't always necessarily get the exact stats about how well people do or don't do. But yeah, it was tough, right? Because you're constantly scratching your head like, what could I have done different? What could we have done different? What's not working? Like, what is making it so hard? But then I always go back to my own story. Like I didn't figure it out my first try either. When you're 16, 17, 18, it's really tough to realize the impact. that this is going to have. And it's not just going to, I think I was under the assumption too, that it would just be a season of my life. I would just be partying, and then eventually like I would see the light and just kind of move on with my life. And a lot of my friends did that. Like we partied hard. Everybody was around 2008, 2009, everybody was into the pills, right? We were all partying on the pills and beer and drinking all the time. But a lot of people, they just packed it in, moved on, went to college, got good jobs. And I was the one that was like left behind of like this full blown addiction that had serious consequences. And I was like, what the heck is, I couldn't help but think, what the heck is wrong with me? Why can't I just pack this in and move on with my life?
And I think it's so interesting that when people go into treatment, and I have taken loved ones to treatment, and you think, oh, I'm dropping my person off. I'm going to either you pay a large amount of money, which some parents end up mortgaging their homes or whatever to pay for these treatment centers. And the only thing you're getting promised when you go there is what? 28 days of sleeping, right? Sleeping well, because you know that your loved one is locked up somewhere. But that's all you're getting. And a lot of times, right? That's it. I mean, I hate it, but it's true. And then now today, what we have on the streets, if you go out and you pick up, everybody's going out right away, picking up, and they're dying because of this fentanyl.
Yeah.
I mean, in the press, they're calling it global global terrorism. And so what do? I find it really interesting, especially recently. And yesterday I did a podcast, and I'm finding it really fascinating about this sober curious movement that's coming around. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's great for people to check it out. I mean, a lot of people I think are getting sober from alcohol. They're giving up alcohol for health reasons too. I mean, there's more. See, it was really guarded for a long time. If we go back to to tobacco, right? You had the commercials of the doctors, or maybe they weren't even doctors, but they appeared like doctors, and it was everywhere, right? The harms were not identified yet because these big companies, big tobacco, big pharma, and big alcohol, they have all the money. They have the money, right? So they control the narrative, and they've controlled it for a really long time. And I'm not a person who's anti-alcohol at all. Like if people are going to do what people are going to do. But I think I think that it is fair that we know the harms involved, just like we didn't know the harms involved with tobacco. Now we do. And it's always like a lot of people, they're struggling with drinking too. They're like, well, it was peer pressure. Somebody said, why don't you have a drink? But if you think about it, like if you mentioned to people, why don't you just smoke a cigarette? Everybody is at this party smoking a cigarette. If you don't smoke cigarettes, that's probably the last thing you're going to be like, oh yeah, like may as well. Like it doesn't really work like that. I know when you're younger, 15, 16, if older people are smoking, you might be likely to take it up. But I think as adults, we're not going to be peer pressured into doing that. We're not going to be peer pressured into doing cocaine. We're not going to be. So it's like, I think it's incredible though, that people are waking up to the fact that alcohol just really doesn't serve a purpose in our lives. It destroys your mental health. It creates a ton of anxiety. Most people I talk to, they always identify with having a ton of anxiety. And I can relate to this too. And I say, when you quit drinking, what impact did it have on your anxiety? And I was talking with somebody this morning, and I was like, do you still have that anxiety? And they're like, well, no, it's gone. It literally was gone. And a lot of us are going to therapy or psychiatrists or psychologists, and we're like, I have this crushing anxiety. And we never really talk to them about our drinking. And I don't even know if they ask, because I asked this person that too. I said, you talk with your therapist about the drinking? No, not really. We were just looking at other stuff, So it's interesting to, when you stop, you start to see, oh, this stuff changed when we might have thought that it was something else.
And nobody talks about the fact that it's a depressant. Do you know what I mean? It's a depressant. So you wake up the next day and you're like, oh my God, what did I do? What, all those feelings. And I think that it's so I got sober in 20, and oh my gosh, I'm like having a brain, 2006. And when I got sober and when you got sober, nobody was really talking about being sober. It was still like very under the radar. It was pretty bad. It was like, oh my God, It
Yeah.
was really like, there was, you didn't see celebrities talking about it unless it was really on the down low. And now you have on your sober, which I love, all your memes and everything else you put up. It's so interesting that now all these people are coming out and going, I'm sober. Like Kyle Richards from the Housewives of Beverly Hills just came out and she's like, I put down a drink for a year. And I don't know that they're necessarily going to AA, because I do think that AA still has that terrible stigma. Do you agree?
I think for some people, I mean, some people are just finding other ways, I think, too, to work through stuff and different avenues to talk with people and to connect with people. I mean, you need connection when you want to get sober. You need connection and other people who have been through it. And I think that more people talk about it, then the more people they're going to be able to connect with and work through stuff, right? But I think there's definitely some parts of a program there that people are not connecting with. I don't think people are saying, "Well, I'm an alcoholic." I mean, I don't call myself an alcoholic. I don't at all, or an addict. I mean, that's the way I was living, but that's not the way I'm living today. And I don't need to. For some people, they say, "Well, you don't want to forget where you were." Look, I'll never forget where I was. I'll never forget where I was, and I don't necessarily need to attach something to it. For some people, that's helpful, and I'm not saying that that's a good thing or bad thing. Like for me, I'm always for whatever works for people, whatever helps you live a better life and be present and be alive and be of service to people and help people. I think people are just connecting with things differently, where they're not like saying think they've hit a rock bottom and they need to make changes. Like they've hit this big massive rock bottom. I think people are hitting rock bottoms, but more internally, like they just don't feel good about themselves. I don't think people are necessarily getting the impaired driving or getting in an accident or, having these big, massive consequences. But I think that people are really experiencing that internal stuff, not being happy with yourself, always trying to escape your entire life evolving around the substance. Your identity becomes attached to it. For a lot of people, it becomes who you are. Everything, right? Every night out, every gathering, everything, the people you hang out with, it really becomes that. And I think when you take a step back and you're like, my goodness, when you get wrapped up in it, I had my friend Mike on the podcast, and he put it so clearly. He said, when you're dancing with the monster, you just can't see what kind of monster it is. And I think once you create some distance from it between you and in the drinking, especially, then you start to see like, man, it's just not helping me in any way, shape, or form. Let's just keep going. And that's where I think the sober curious thing is coming from, is that people want to be healthier. They want to feel better. You want to do that. And you see other people who they are sober, and it's like, wow, they're doing well in their lives. They're present. They're running businesses. They're being successful. You mentioned the celebrities, right? There's a lot of celebrities too that are like doing incredible things, and some people get upset by that, like, oh, the celebrities this, celebrity that. But the reality is they have massive platforms, and they're very influential to people. So whatever story they share, people will pay attention. So I don't think it's a thing that's going to cause any harm. I think it's great awareness.
I agree with you 100% on everything you just said. The one thing that I find that, and I want to get your opinion on this, it's the drugs that are out there today. It's not the alcohol, it's the pills, and it's, the kids getting hurt, getting put on, oxys or whatever, painkiller. And then they love the high, they get addicted right then. And then they're chasing the heroin on the streets, and it's killing people. I think more people died of, overdose from fentanyl than they did from COVID. So what is the treatment you would say would be the best for somebody that's dealing with that? I mean, I think it's totally a different beast than alcohol. Do you agree or not agree?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is in a sense because it's not intentional. So it's not like alcohol takes time, I think, to really, cause massive effects. But
Yeah.
this stuff here, it's not intentional. But young people are buying what they think is something else, and it's poison. So I don't think these a lot of people too, they're not necessarily like quote unquote drug addicts. You don't have to be a drug. When I was using heroin, nobody I knew was dying. And even the people that did it was maybe for other health reasons because of the, injecting and not, not sanitary conditions and different stuff like that. But now it's this poisoning thing, right? Where people are getting what they don't know. They don't know what it is. So, I mean, that's it. That's it. So, I mean, you have to create awareness for people, and you've got to try to stop people from getting into this stuff in the first place. That's where it has to be, because it could be your first time. So it's not
Yeah.
even like you're treating an addiction. It's more like you're creating awareness that, hey, this could be, this could be it. And I think creating a purpose for people, even if you go back to like high schools and stuff, in my story, I never had any purpose, any direction. I didn't do well in school, so I was just kind of brushed to the side of like, hey, the guy doesn't do well in school. Let's give him Adderall, and hopefully he can follow some rules and get through. But it was never like, hey, let's try to, let's try to meet this guy where he's at, what he's capable of doing, and let's try to build on his strengths. It was just like, if you're not good in school, then forget about it. Like, there's nothing for you. Do good in school, get good grades. And then you go to college and you can live a happy ever after life, So I think we got to go back and meet people where they're at, because that's a lot of people we're losing. And even through my show, my podcast, I mean, a lot of people share the same story: divorced parents, parents who struggle with addiction. A lot of the stories, although they're different, they have a lot of the same similarities. You hear a lot of the same things happening in people's lives: abuse, sexual assault. Those are huge things that are, I think, triggering addiction. And that's where if we could create an environment where people could talk about stuff and start to heal these things, or open up and feel comfortable, then maybe they would go to that instead of to the addiction. Because the thing is, these addictions, they heal the pain. They don't heal the pain. They keep it away. They keep us from feeling it. And then that's what we really get hooked on. So there's layers to it for sure. But I mean, awareness is a big one. And when you're 16, 17, 18, you don't ever think that's going to be your story. You're not, I don't know if you're able. I wasn't able to connect the dots that would be my story, that I would be living the way I ended up living. We've got to find a way to break through, to show people that, like, it can be. And there's a lot of great people out there who definitely do that work, but it's just that one wrong turn, that one decision can change everything.
Well, it's kind of because I graduated high school in 1987. I'm a lot older than you, I think, but
That's when I was born.
there you go. So
Yeah.
so in 87, I graduated from high school. And when I was growing up, parents were drinking, right? That's what parents did. That's what moms did. If they were going to be like, do anything, they're going to drink at a cocktail party. They're going to be drinking, but there were none of these pills. They didn't have Adderall. Like the kid that was like, there was nobody like you said, oh, that person has ADD. It was like, oh no, that kid's the class clown. Look at him. He's got the dunce cap in the corner and they have him sitting there. And
Yeah.
today, these moms think that the only option is to make their kids be good is to give them Adderall or to pop a pill, because parents were not taking, like, again, I never, my kids were young were really young when I got sober. So I've never been a pill person. But today, so many parents go and they're like, the moms are like, oh, I have to give them Adderall. They have ADD. And I don't think that's always the answer. I mean, with my son, I knew we had addiction in our family. He's got severe ADHD, and I'd beat up the teacher. I'd actually tell her to fuck off. Actually, I'd be like, you have to deal with him. Like, he's not going to sit in the corner for 30 minutes and listen to you tell a story. He's a boy. He's got yayas, and he cannot listen to a story. And I probably couldn't sit there and listen to a story for 30 minutes. But becoming the advocate instead of listening to the doctors, because I find it really ironic that doctors don't even spend any time in medical school talking about addiction.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much time they spend or they don't spend. Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably more now than it was. But I mean, for the medications, right? That's what happened with the opiates, right? Is that they were flooded. Everybody was getting them. And then they scaled back. Everybody scaled back. And then that's when people, made the shift. I made the shift to the streets.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So you started this motivation and you have all this swag and all this awesome stuff and it's amazing. I was checking out your website last night and I just love that we're all getting out there and we're talking about it because again, when I got sober and even when you got sober, I mean nobody was talking about this like they are today.
Yeah, no, more definitely more and more people. Even when I first started on Instagram, there was only a handful of us that were doing it. It's crazy now. It's crazy now to see it. I mean, there's hundreds, thousands probably, but there was
It's
only like 4 people when I first started on Instagram.
Yeah, it was, I feel like the same way. When I started on Instagram, when I started my podcast, they said to me, go to a podcast. For one, I didn't even know this was like 7 years ago. I'm like, I don't even know what a podcast is. Nobody even knew what one was. And all I wanted to do was change the stigma. And I think we're making a difference. What do you think?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course we are. Yeah, I mean, it's just to normalize it, right? Just to normalize it and let people know that they're not alone and that we're all out here. We went through struggles, even in sobriety, we're going through struggles. Life still happens. It doesn't just, stop and all of a sudden get better every day. I mean, we have different ways to work through things, but life still goes on, but just gives people that permission. There's a quote, I can't remember where it's from, but it kind of goes like this: as you shine your light, it gives other people permission to do the same. And I would say like that's the big mission of what I'm on, is that because I don't plan to change the world myself. That's a big task. But what I want to do is I want to inspire other people to speak up and create their own platforms in their own way, whether it's grassroots in their community, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook, whether it's just with 4 people in their life, to give them permission to share their story in hopes to help other people. Because the drug addict and alcoholic, if we want to use those terms, those are your next door neighbors. That's your aunt, your uncle, your grandparents, your cousin, your nephews. It's not the people that, you know, are living under a bridge somewhere. It's your next door neighbor. It's people closer to you than you think. And you can't change anybody. I can't change anybody. But if we share our story, maybe we plant the seed. Maybe we give permission for somebody to change themselves. And that's been incredible because I get messages all the time. Oh man, I started my show because of what you're doing. It was give me the go ahead, the green light that I could do it. Oh, I started my platform. Oh, I this or that, and I'm thinking like that's what it's all about. Because when you can create that kind of movement, then you can really have a change. I'm not looking to get famous. I'm not looking to take credit for anything. But I think if we can do one thing, that would be really cool to inspire other people, however they're gonna do it. But just show people what's possible. Cause you're right. Like when we started, and especially I'm sure when you started, it was it was a shame thing. Oh, you got a problem or you can't. A lot of people are like, you can't drink, you can't do this. And I can. Has nothing to do with can or can't. It's a choice. Like that's just what I choose to do. Like it's not that I can't. Nothing, nothing's crazy is gonna happen, right away. It won't look probably any different than the other people hanging around. Um, but I just choose not to. So
Do you
it's
still I'm gonna end with, do you still seek out, like, getting treatment or, I mean, going to meetings or doing anything like that? Do you do any of that stuff?
Yeah, so I'm really involved with an app called SoberBuddy. So inside the
Yeah.
app, we have our community. And I host the groups. And when I say host, I'm just an active participant. So I do 3 groups a week in there, and we all come together and we connect. We have different topics we talk about, and it's just incredible with them and with that. So I do that a lot. And just being involved with stuff is really helpful with everything. And now I've got 3 kids, so that keeps me fairly busy. 3, 5, 5, 3, and 14 months, so my hands are full in that sense, and everything. But, staying connected with people has always been very big. And I have a big network, of people that I can reach out to for support and help. And I put up a post the other day too that I don't ever want to sell the dream. I was asking myself, like, am I selling the dream that this is all just beautiful? And I'm like, you know what? Sometimes I think I am. And I think I wanted to put it out there that, like, yeah, this is still a struggle. Sober or not, like, life is still tough, right? You have goals you want to reach, and you have businesses you want to build, and everything like that is still tough. And being a father is tough. Sometimes I'm thinking, like, my goodness, am I doing a good job? Am I doing, but I always kind of come back to the thing of, I'm doing a heck of a lot better than I was, many, many moons ago. And I just try to keep track, but I wanted to put it out there for people that, like, if things are rocky, like, I get it. I'm with you. It's not just all beautiful in sobriety. Like, definitely it's better than how it was, but life still, happens, right? So it's something to keep there's always something to work on. And if there's not, then you got to push yourself a little bit to get uncomfortable.
It's being a parent is so, and now my kids are like closer and you're closer to your age. Mine are almost 20. My oldest is almost 27. Then I have 25 and 23. And, you just try to do your very, very, very best. And, I feel like getting sober, I got sober in AA, and it was like a great place to learn, to learn
Mm.
my perimeters. But I didn't get sober to go live with just people that are sober, right? Like, I always go to bars, I go to restaurants, I hang out with people that drink all the time. And all I want to show people is that you can have a life without alcohol. And you can have a life with these feelings of inadequacy, feelings of fear, feelings of sadness, feelings, because I'm at the age that I'm losing people, parents and all that sort of stuff. And instead of running away from the feeling, you kind of lean into it and go, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. And being a sober parent, I mean, people are like, weren't you just like, you were so much better? And I'm like, no, let me tell you, I still screamed at my kids all the time. And was like, oh my God, do I have to make chicken surprise again for dinner? Like, what do I have to make for dinner? It's so overwhelming. The laundry's never done. Nothing's ever finished. And, but just getting through life, knowing that I get up in the morning, at least I still remember where my car is, and that I didn't intentionally hurt somebody anymore. Cause I think that's the one thing that we don't think about. At least I didn't think about. And I guess we'll end with this, when we're in our addiction, we don't think about who we're hurting on the outside. We don't think like, oh my gosh, I'm affecting my parents. I'm affecting my siblings. I'm affecting my community. Cause at least for me, I was driving like a big Suburban with a couple cocktails in me, and then, a sippy cup of wine. And I thought it was okay. But the reality is that it wasn't okay. Cause I could have hurt people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that too, where yeah, you mentioned being a parent. Yeah, it's hard. And even once you're sober too, there's still challenges, right? It just, I feel like for me, I just, things, I just go about things differently, right? Like, through everything. So yeah, great thing what you're doing too. And 300 and something episodes. Like, that's crazy.
It's crazy. And let me tell you, Brad, I've wanted to give up many times. I've said to my youngest son, Henry, I'm going to give up. I can't stand it. I don't have enough followers. Look at all these people have so many more followers, and I've been around so much longer. Why don't I have these followers? And who watched this and who watched that? And I go and I get in that, because I'm just human, and I want to say, oh my gosh, did anybody watch that? And he's like, just keep going, mom, just keep doing it. And so that's what I do. I don't know if what will ever, I'll probably be doing this till I'm dead. And it's just my way of helping people realize that it's okay, because there are so many feelings that we all have of inadequacy, of like, oh my gosh, the addiction, everything, like abandonment. There's all sorts of things we could go into. But I feel like the fact that we are talking about it, and I raised my kids knowing that they're going to drink. I knew they were going to drink, right? I knew that they were going to drink because they're my kids. So they're going to be like me a little bit, right? But I want them to know that you don't have to die from this. You have to just realize that you have this gene, which I believe I have the gene that made me more susceptible than most people to having this alcohol. Like, I was an alcoholic from the minute I was born. I don't know that, and I hate the word alcoholic, like you mentioned at the beginning too, but I just wanted them to know that if they had a problem with it, that it's okay to talk about it, because we can find a solution. I got you. We got you. We can figure this out. I got your back, right?
Yeah, no, that's so powerful. And I think that's a big part of what we need to work on for a solution is for parents too, to be open to conversations, like to be open to where people are struggling and what people are struggling with, and not just judging people and wanting to fix everybody, but sometimes just listening to what's going on, and maybe ask the question like, how can I help? And you know what? As a parent, if you ask that question, if you can't, and sometimes you can't help. And I think you've got to work through that too. And I always tell people, they message me all the time, my husband, my this, my daughter. I, I ask them, what are you doing for yourself? Well, nothing. I don't have the problem. Well, let me tell you, you need to get some help. And people are unwilling, unwilling and not like this, because having somebody in your home that's struggling with addiction will wreak havoc on every area of your life. And if you're not looking after yourself, you can't pour from an empty cup. So I think it's great that you want to help somebody, but you need to acquire the tools, and you need to go and see a professional. You need to go and see somebody who's trained in this so they can help you. But it's so tough. It's so tough because don't want to do anything but just point the finger at the person struggling. And that was a big challenge when the young fellas got out of rehab, right? Because where do you go when you're 16, 17 and you get out of rehab? You're not getting your own place. You're going back to that same place. 9 times out of 10, the people who lived there didn't do any work. And you go back to the same triggering environment, same toxic environment, same environment that blamed you for everything. And then you've changed. And it's really hard to see other people remain the same, and it's like, but at the end of the day, it is the person who's struggling. It's their responsibility to stay sober, to put in the work, to do what needs to be done. But it does cause a big wrench for that process for people if you go back and people don't change, but like, get into therapy, get some help, put up your hand and ask for help, because you're carrying all the baggage. You're carrying this stuff. And without help, like, it'll overwhelm you every time. It'll overwhelm you. And you need the tools on how you can, because there are ways you can work with people who aren't ready. There are ways about how you can be supportive to people who aren't ready. And there's a lot of great people out there who really help out in this area with a lot of experience, like way more than I could ever have. But this is what they specialize in. And just talking with them over the years, the stuff they say, it's like, it's not going to fix everything, but I think it'll put you, it'll put you at the job site with more than just a pencil. A lot of people are showing up to the job site trying to build a house with a pencil.
Mhm.
It's going to be a big task. You need some more tools on your belt.
I love that. I want to ask you something. Does SoberBuddy have a section for family members?
We don't have a section for family members. No.
Maybe you could throw one in there, because I have to tell you that when you were just talking about that, and I don't want to, I could talk to you all day, and I know you've got stuff to do. So I'm going to finish this up, but I always find it interesting because it is such a family disease, and so many parents, and I used to see families all the time, and the families, and I had to get out of it just like you did, because I was like banging my head against the wall. I'm like, oh my God, don't you realize that you've got a problem too? Like, go to Al-Anon, go find a group, find a solution. But no one ever wanted to go to Al-Anon. They hated it. I mean, and I got why they hated it, because I've been to Al-Anon and I'm like, oh my God, I'd leave there and want to take a drink myself, because all it is the complaints. There's no solution. So I think there needs to be more resources for the family, because the family is the one that's really sick, and the kids and family members that come home from treatment, it is the same exact thing. The same bills are there, the same bullshit's there, that they walk into the door and they're like, oh my God, I can't take it. I know I just had 28 days where I was clean, but this emotions just come over you like like a huge wave, and you don't know what to do but pick up.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy. Thank you so much for coming on. You were awesome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you. Will you send me so I can put it in your description? Well, we'll talk about this at the end. You guys reach out to me. If you have any questions for Brad, you can email me at elizabeth@elizabethchance.com. I'm going to have Brad's bio in there. You're going to be able to find his SoberBuddy in there. You're going to be able to find everything that you need to get in touch with him, or I'll just forward him the message. And until next time, everybody, again, thanks so much for coming on, Brad. And until next time, everybody, keep getting busy, living. Bye.